Good morning, folks. Real pleasure to have Jerome Dubois and Rylan Hamilton, co-CEOs and co-founders of Six River Systems, which they call a wall-to-wall fulfillment solutions provider, and it's part of Shopify now. Really, they are doing some remarkable stuff, automating warehouses. Jerome, Rylan, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Tell us about your fascinating backgrounds, and tell me about, are you going to have a white Christmas? Sounds like you're going to have a white Christmas in New England.
So thanks, Vinnie. Thanks for having us on. We're excited to wrap up the year with this call and interview. Very quickly, I've been in the space since I was about 14 years old, so that makes it over 30 years at this point. But really professionally for the last 20 years or so. Started in the software space in warehouse management software, and then moved on to Kiva Systems back in 2008, which is really the pioneer in mobile robotic automation warehousing, really the first successful provider of that technology. Really kind of revolutionized the space. And then after Kiva was acquired by Amazon, Rylan and I teamed up to found Six River Systems. So, Rylan?
You know, I've been to an Amazon distribution center. Those Kivas are amazing. And what you're doing now is you've kind of brought them down a level lower and made them even more accessible, right? So look forward to talking about that.
Yeah.
Rylan, Jerome dominated the first few minutes. Go ahead.
It's been great to partner with Jerome for the last 5 years, focused on Six River, but I have to say he was definitely a key part of this because he's been doing this for a long time. And I definitely have maybe a non-traditional background getting into the space, but right after college, actually didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was pretty confident I didn't want to spend my days in front of a computer all day long. And so I joined the Navy, and I spent 4 years as an engineering officer in the Navy, sailing all around the world, and it was an amazing experience. Went to graduate school and then was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was actually working for a e-commerce company called Vistaprint, which was an amazing company, but I didn't have that kind of like hardware, kind of like that passion. That was an only software play in terms of my experience at the company. And so I always wanted to join this company called Kiva. I'd actually applied there in graduate school and they passed on me, which was probably a good thing for both sides. But by, when I started talking to Kiva in 2010, there's definitely a lot of momentum. And I told the person who's recruiting me, who actually went to graduate school and also been in the military, I said, I have no background in supply chain, robotics. I think I can figure out how to be a program manager, but you're definitely taking a risk on me. And he said, we're growing so quickly, I'm sure you can help. And so I started off, Jerome would sell these really large, complicated deals, and then I would have to actually take them from the time the contract was signed to deploying hundreds of Kiva robots. And it was an amazing experience to learn on the job, to work, to be linked at the hip with our customers to make them successful, and to see what Kiva did really well and kind of where there are areas of opportunity to make it even better. And that was an awesome experience to kind of catch up in this industry. And then, when we were acquired, I'd been at the company for about 2 years when Kiva was acquired by Amazon. And the next 2 years was just an amazing experience to go scale this technology. And, for those really large Amazon buildings with thousands of Kiva robots, like to think back in 2010 that would actually ever happen would just kind of, I think, blow your mind, but it was happening. And to be able to scale that technology, work with other material handling kind of vendors in the space, it was an amazing experience. So, if you fast forward to 2015, I kind of had that high of doing software and hardware, and was looking for that kind of next opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have kept us fed and entertained and so on in the pandemic. So thank you. Kivas and your bots are kind of the unsung heroes during this pandemic. So thank you for your service. So guys, in all the doom and gloom, it's actually been an amazing time for what I call business acrobatics, right? Yeah. So we've seen all kinds of banks doing 5 million PPP loans in 2 months to small businesses, 3M quadrupling in 95 capacity, last mile logistics, the Instacarts and the DoorDashes and so on, just unbelievable scaling up or scaling down in some cases. I interviewed the CIO of Delta, and he was describing all what they've had to do to scale down. you guys, obviously are deep into supply chain and logistics. Tell us about some of the heroics you've seen there, and also what you've seen outside, like in healthcare and so on, in New England, or just broadly.
Yep. So I can share with you that we've seen a number of examples, and you go from starting off the year not knowing, the worst thing that was happening in the year at the beginning of the year was the Australian wildfires, right? I think everybody's forgotten about that, and that was terrible. But really, what has swept the world economy at this point, and the world is the COVID situation. We started seeing real impacts into our customer supply chains sometime in the March-April timeframe, when all of a sudden warehouses were getting shut down and people were rethinking how to get product to customers, because people were no longer going to stores to get product. In addition to that, so we had customers that were primarily fulfilling to retail stores, doing what's called retail replenishment. Those warehouses were winding down volumes. Other warehouses were seeing peak-like volumes jump up 3-4x overnight for certain products. In fact, we have a customer in New Jersey that is the second largest distributor of medical apparel and the scrubs that nurses and doctors wear, et cetera. They saw a huge jump in volume, and we were able to support them in the distribution, tripling of their volumes very, very quickly. By adding additional capacity for them and by helping them run multiple shifts, they were able to meet that volume. And that's just an example of, the one customer seeing tremendous jump where they normally wouldn't have seen that kind of increase. I actually went to go visit that customer in September and to really talk to them about it. And they said that, that the flexibility of these types of systems has allowed them to ramp up very, very quickly additional capacity while, maintaining the employee base that they have. Another example of this challenge is coming into peak, we had customers who were facing nearly 60% absenteeism on a daily basis. So when you're planning throughput and you're planning response times to your customers and making commitments to SLAs to your customers, when 60% of your hourly labor doesn't show up, or 25% of them don't come back after lunch, you have very, very significant issues with managing capacity and planning capacity. And that's where we work very carefully with our customers, sometimes last minute shifting capacity from one building to the other, or providing them additional robotic capacity so that they can keep up with the volumes and really make up for the human labor aspect of this, which was really very, very difficult to predict for them. So a lot of hours spent working with our customers doing that.
Guy presented to me on your solution a few weeks ago, and I'll link to that in this interview. But he mentioned that there was a prospect you guys had where the HR group said, we're not sure about your solution. You're going to displace labor. We're not ready for that. And then he said, 2 months later, they called us back and said, you may actually help us safely distance our workers. Come on back.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So
yeah, we deployed out the system at a very large system in Indiana, and the primary reason for the rapid deployment was because they were worried about getting shut down for COVID, and our system would allow the operators to work in a more socially distanced manner and reduce the risk for contamination or cross-contamination or infection with workers. And that was a big driver. And within 3 weeks, we went from nothing running in that building to a fully ramped up system. And that's a very unique thing that companies like Six River can provide, the integration of software and hardware and that turnkey solution to be able to move very, very quickly. So,
and you don't need the big warehouse, the big distribution center that Amazon has.
That's right.
Big ordinary last mile type warehouse location and deploy much more bots. Yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk about with your backgrounds in supply chains. It's been fascinating to see all the reshoring that people are thinking about, right? Moving away, China plus one, China plus 2, 3 type strategies. The resurgence of rail traffic. Amazing how much rail has picked up in the last few months. the repurposing of commercial planes. Are you excited about all these changes, or is it just too much change too fast?
I think, obviously the transportation infrastructure changes are pretty significant. But with our focus around warehousing, I think one of the trends there, it's really about making these supply chains more agile and more responsive. I think the big thing that we're seeing from our customers is the ability to deploy and redeploy inventory and capacity into different geographical areas. We're seeing new business models evolve with powered by companies like Shopify, of like the flash sale models and all these different things that put very, very different constraints on supply chain compared to the traditional retail distribution model, which was big box retail, just ship out cases of purple Gatorade to everybody. This is a flash sale model. It's a limited inventory model, or it's a regionalized inventory model where now, because the inventory is getting closer and closer to the consumer, to reduce those transportation lead times, precisely that dependency, the real urgency is about being able to flex up and flex down that capacity as needed. And to your point, the last mile parcel, which really has become the constraint that we've seen now in the last couple of months, where everybody's expecting their deliveries at the same time, and there just isn't enough capacity in the network to be able to support that. So, I think that will certainly, these regionalized inventories will help that to an extent. Also, trends around buy online, pick up at store, buy online, pick up curbside, I think will also help. So we're going to see micro fulfillment really pick up and enable these types of things. Some people may remember the old service merchandise model where you would place the order and the store was a warehouse, but they would bring you your items directly to the counter. And that's effectively, I think, what we're going to start seeing more of. And automation has a big piece to play there.
It's fascinating to see all the changes. I'm particularly fascinated with the cold chain. I hadn't focused on it till the recent vaccine distribution, but throughout as the food chain broke down, right, meat packing plants and all that, the cold chain was already starting to have an impact. Question is, I've heard from some folks that the infrastructure is a little dated, and now we're just taxing the hell out of it with the vaccine distribution, combined with the Christmas shopping and so on. As folks who are closer to that, what can you share about the cold chain?
Yeah, I mean, my comment there would be fulfillment supply chain is really hard. And if you add in a constraint like cold chain, it makes it even harder. And the fact that you have to call in the US military to guarantee the delivery of all these vaccines to the endpoint just shows how challenging this is. And I think not every supply chain can call up the US military and say, we need help to be able to kind of solve this problem. And so we think longer term technology will kind of be a solution where you don't need to bring in these large organizations and just throw resources at it to guarantee delivery. And that's kind of, if we think about our customers who run warehouses, they need technology to be able to power these warehouses where people are saying, I want something tomorrow, or I want something in 2 days. It's the same problem with, cold chain. Like, it's not okay, in today's, economy, if you order something online, they say, yeah, you might get it in a couple days, you might get it in 3 weeks, but it's just a really bad customer experience. So cold chain, I think, kind of exposes to everyone how hard this problem is, but we've definitely been, seeing that in other types of operations for a long time.
So should we thank Providence that we have so many different layers of UPS, FedEx, Amazon Prime, and the US military? Most countries don't have that kind of depth, right? I mean, this is just phenomenal. I mean, as supply chain guys, you guys must be just in awe of what's going on. How well the different supply chains have done all year round.
Relatively speaking, I would agree with you. I think that if you throw something like COVID into the mix, and there has been the ability from a technology infrastructure perspective and a transportation infrastructure perspective and warehouse infrastructure, there's been a lot of adapting that's happened, but at great cost. And I think that that's not sustainable, right? So the government has certainly facilitated a lot of this and has opened up, spending in many areas and facilitated certain things, but I think that ultimately these trends that we're seeing will be permanent behavior changes for consumers, and that will not be sustainable with the current models that are being used today. So the way to drive down the cost there is through technology. That's a proven thing, right? Education and technology are the two things that will reduce the costs in these services, and that's what we have to get to. It doesn't mean a replacement of the human in the chain. It just means enhancing and really empowering the humans so they can do more with the time that they have. And that's really where I think the best use of automation is, right?
Jerome, I'm glad you mentioned humans versus machines. I wrote a book about automation 5 years ago, and I looked at automation in 50 different industries. Wineries, obviously your sector, machine learning in different white-collar jobs, drones in certain occupations, and so on. And 5 years ago, my conclusion was, yeah, it's there, but it's not affordable, it's not reliable. So a review called it, my book, Slow Motion Automation. This is when Oxford and Gartner were saying, oh my God, we're going to lose 40% of the workforce. I mean, they were way out on the extreme side. Mine was much more balanced. I must admit, this year, I've somewhat changed my mind. I'm like, oh my God, automation is finally accelerating.
That's right.
And for different reasons, right? Like you say, workers weren't coming to work, or just the volumes are off the walls, whatever, right? What does that mean for us as a society? Is this automation, now that it's accelerating, are those doomsday scenarios going to come true, or are we going to evolve in different ways? You guys think about this all the time.
Yeah, I'll certainly throw in a thought there, and I think Rylan can follow up. But I think that when we look at the acceleration of automation, it's true, it's always the case. Technology, when it becomes affordable and accessible to the small and medium businesses, when you have this federalization or democratization of technology to the masses, is when it has the biggest impact. And what we've seen is the haves, i.e. the very large companies who have been able to use automation to their advantage for decades, that trickle-down effect, which Six River kind of represents, right? Making the automation, in this case robotics, more accessible to a larger audience will have a massive impact on the business models that are driven in the consumer behavior. If you look at, as an example, mobile phones, went from exclusive BlackBerry use to then anybody with $10 can get a mobile phone and start ordering online, to now the majority of the behavior is driven by teenagers and in the buying behavior, and adults are adopting the same type of behavior. That has had a massive impact on the service levels that the retailers and merchants have had to do, and the response to that is to make investments in technology. We see this pattern over and over again. There are businesses today, billion-dollar businesses, that have 4 or 5 employees. They have Shopify on the front end, and they have outsourced services to fulfill all the orders on the back end. Like, it's a branding exercise. So, we feel as if bringing that technology and making it available to everybody, democratizing that, makes it a game changer for so many companies and for so many people that are out there. And we see that growth. We see the explosive growth in collaborative robotics and in automation, again, not to replace the human, but to enhance and empower what's currently there.
And I'll add on to what Jerome said, is we've always approached this in terms of being collaborative with people. There are very important roles that people play within the warehouse, and we want to make those people just more productive and give them the right tools to allow them to do their job and do it well, because there are hard jobs that people are in these warehouses. So we don't have some project in the back of the office where next year we're going to announce a lights out warehouse where you don't have people. Like, it's just people will continue to play a very important role for a very long time. So it's not taking away jobs per se, it's just making these jobs better, which is definitely, if you think about 5 or 10 years ago, warehousing, supply chain, not a really kind of sexy industry, and now it's very hot. And so the types of jobs we're creating is you've got to go manage a fleet of 100 plus kind of mobile robots that's out there, plus all the different people, hit very tight deadlines. That's a hard job, and I think it continues to be a great job for people who want to get in this industry.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because in the book I had talked about super workers. So I had examples of UPS drivers. Many of them have done 1 million miles without an accident, right? Because of all the telematics on the UPS trucks.
Yeah.
I'd written about a Facebook data center which was run by 30 employees, right? I mean, just unbelievable. Couldn't have been done 20 years ago.
That's right.
The productivity I showed through automation, the collaborative automation that you're talking about, has a huge potential. I think politicians and some of my analyst friends sometimes, take it to an extreme and come up with doomsday scenarios. So I'm glad you guys are talking about collaboration.
Ask those people to get up their cell phone for a day and see what response you get.
Yep.
It's just technology's an enabler. It's not a replacement. It's an enabler and a facilitator. And I think, the real problem is that there are two issues in this industry. One, nobody goes to college to go work in a warehouse. And number two, the population of people working in warehouses is aging. So we have a massive deficit of people wanting to work in this industry to begin with. And to attract new people, you actually have to provide them better tools. And we have seen this where it is now become a sales tool to attract talent to different companies by saying, we are actually working with robotics here. You get to work with a robot every single day. And it's a tool for you to work with, not to replace you, but to work with. And all of a sudden now, oh, wow, gamification and everything else kind of makes it more exciting. It's now a skilled job where that skill can go into other places and increase the marketability of these individuals. One feel-good story that I've heard many times is, the classic stereotypical person working in a warehouse has a family at home, and they are trying to do the best they can. These are good paying jobs, by the way. These are very good paying jobs because of the shortage of labor. They get to go back home and tell their kids that they get to work with a robot every day. That's an inspirational story. That mom that was working 2 different jobs to be able to put meat on the table and put food on the table now gets to work one job and tell her 3 or 4 year old kid, I got to work with Chuck today, and tell the story. And what does that do for that child? Like the imagination and the creativity and everything else. It's just, I think it's an amazing insertion of technology, and it has a significant impact, generational impact on us.
Jerome, by the way, Chuck is your version of Kiva.
Yes,
but you're in the Boston area. That is the center of the academic world, right? I heard Boston has like 400 different universities and higher education institutions. Part of the problem, and I live in the white collar world. I think we haven't been listening to folks like Michael Rowe. We've had such a shortage of trade and blue collar workers, and we've looked down upon that. Yeah. So I'm hoping we get a swing back into, look, doing things with your hands isn't bad. In fact, you're making it sexy. You get to play with virtual reality in some field service jobs, some bots in warehouses or on the shop floor and so on. How are you, are you going around telling younger workers, younger employees, hey, going to college for a white collar job isn't quite as sexy. We have the sexy stuff now. What are you doing to make it increase the interest in younger people to come work for warehouses or blue collar jobs?
I would just say that when we talk about facilitating the work that the associate is doing, the technology that we put in place literally works with you every minute of every day, and it is that we get feedback that there's less walking, it's less fatiguing, it's more stimulating. The interaction is gamified. They get instant feedback. So it changes the pace of work. It makes it much easier for somebody to learn how to do as well. These jobs used to take weeks and months to train somebody on how to do them. Now that you can learn how to do them very, very quickly. So we're able to attract in a whole different category of folks that previously didn't feel as if they had the skill set to go do this. So that's made it exciting. Of course, being in Boston, it's it is also the supply chain robotics capital of the world too. We have a number of supply chain robotics companies and just robotics companies generally that are based here. But recruiting talent for Six River has also been something that's been, we've been working on for a very long time, because it's not just about people in the warehouse, but it's also about the technology providers that are providing the technology in the warehouse. And we're competing with the Facebooks and the Microsofts and the Amazons and everything else too. So, Rylan, if you want to spend a second talking about what we're doing there.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages of being in the Boston area is there are some of these kind of hands-on jobs, and it's hard to find talent of people who know how to create something, either a mobile robot from scratch, or also know how to take and build up a supply chain where you can make tens of thousands of these kind of units per year. And so it used to be kind of Amazon Robotics was one of the only kind of players in this field. And now in the Boston area, there are dozens of companies kind of working on warehouse automation, robotics. And if it weren't for those people, Jerome and I wouldn't be here today. Like being able to kind of pull all that talent together, being able to take a product to market fairly quickly, like it just relies on having people with sort of deep domain experience. And Boston just has been a great hub for this type of activity.
Yeah, Boston's got the DNA, the hardware software DNA from a very, very long generations now, between Data General and Wang and digital equipment company and EMC and others. And that grit, if you will, of working with your hands, getting down and dirty. We've got people out in the field fixing robots and turning wrenches and doing everything that they need to do. That's a great skill set, and it's very valuable.
Glad you brought it up. Soul of the new machine, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Shopify has filled a really important niche in the U.S. economy, right? Which a lot of retailers don't want to work with Amazon. And obviously you've been a big part of their fulfillment. Do you see an opportunity in other parts of the world or in verticals? There are players like Ranger that are very strong in certain markets. Or are you happy with the consumer markets you're fulfilling now?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally it's very early days for us, and there's just a lot of opportunity globally. But we've always just been very customer focused and in saying, what problems do you have and how can we help you solve those? And I think if you kind of rewind 5 years ago, it wasn't obvious that we would, get acquired by this company called Shopify or anything, but we just knew there was a really big opportunity out there. And I think as we think about the next 5 years, it's not obvious where we'll be, but I think it's just so early days in terms of what we're building and how we want to help our customers, and then also work with Shopify and help their merchants. So big opportunity, but I don't, so we're not as focused on other companies and kind of what they're doing. We've always just been focused on our customers and solving their problems.
I could talk to you guys for hours. It's fascinating, all the automation and conversations. What other things are you seeing that has made you optimistic, positive this year?
What a year 2020 has been. But our parent company Shopify, we were acquired just over a year ago. And just to go through this year and to kind of, when the days were really dark kind of in the spring and it was unclear kind of where things would go, we sort of doubled down and said, we're building for the long term. We know that, our customers need this technology today and in the future. And so rather than kind of pausing, we just doubled down and continue to, invest in our technology, to continue to kind of try to accelerate our roadmap. And so that was, I feel very fortunate to be in that spot for in really dark days, just to say, let's double down and try to get our product out to our customers even faster. And so that's been our kind of mantra, and I think that really helped us try to get through this year.
Well, on behalf of millions of consumers, thank you for the acrobatics you and all your colleagues at Shopify have done. So keep doing what you're doing, and we'll have you back in every few months to talk about the next generation stuff you guys are planning.
Great. Thank you, Vinnie. Have a safe and happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, and I'm glad we're not having a white Christmas in Florida, but enjoy that.
Pretty white here, yeah.
Yep.
Happy holidays.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.